Hello, on Forest Focus as Nottingham Forest appoint Ange Postecoglou as their new manager a day after Nuno was sacked, probably even less than that. Actually, it's a move that hasn't necessarily been met with universal approval, to say the least, among the Forest fan base. So I'm wanting to hear more about the work he'd done at Tottenham and Celtic in his two most recent jobs. Lots of in-depth stuff from Baker, our resident Tottenham fan, tactically about the job he's done and some thoughts around man management, media management, all that kind of stuff. And then we speak to Martin from 20 Minute Tim's, a Celtic podcast, to get his thoughts on Ange. And it's fair to say he absolutely loves him. So do check out both of those. Let us know what you think in the comments if it's changed your mind at all, either way, positive or negative. Would welcome the feedback, certainly. In the meantime, we'll start with Baker and get his thoughts on Ange's time at Spurs. Baker, evening. How are you doing today, mate?
Very well. It's definitely an interesting day as a Spurs fan. Like, didn't expect to see Ange back in the league so soon. And I don't know how I feel about it.
How do you feel about his time at Spurs? Just kick us off with some brief thoughts, and you've got some charts and stuff that we'll go through. But just in general, what would you
Yeah,
say about him?
I would say, when he came in, I was all aboard the hype. People would tell me, you're going to hear from, I think, the Celtic fan, but or I've heard from a Celtic fan by now, but is they some of the things they passed on to me was that he very rarely gets his words wrong, like says the right stuff all of the time. I felt very much invested in the man early on, and I think that played out on the pitch. I definitely think is when the first season, so the 23-24 season, at the start of it, his motivational world. He needs players to be motivated. Like we all do. The Premier League's an unforgiving place, but he needs everybody on board for the style of play he wanted to play. And I think that was really, really possible early in the season when players are very fresh, and secondly when new manager bounce to an extent. So I'd say that very, very starting period, it was fantastic. I think people have almost maybe forgot just how good the start was of that first season that he was here, and against a tough backdrop. I think the other thing people forget is that Kane left literally as he started. It was see you later, Kane. Huge moment for him. So to have started really, really well, that was phenomenal. Then the injuries came. Everyone will remember that Chelsea game where we had 9 men and still played that huge high line. And you will see the clips over and over of that's just who I am. It's just who I'm going to be all the time I'm here. But ultimately, we lost both centre backs in that game. One through suspension and one through injury, and then we eventually lost both through injuries over the period of times. And injuries never went away the whole time he was there. Stylistically, it felt like the style contributed to those injuries. It felt like early in the season when everyone's hamstrings are fresh, they've had a pre-season, games tended to come once a week, that life was good. As soon as it became a 3 game a week, as soon as every game matters, which obviously happens more in the Premier League than necessarily the Scottish Premier League, then it became hard to continue to do the physical things that he would like from us. As soon as you have an injury, I always felt like with Ange that he was trying to get us to play like Real Madrid, but unfortunately he had Tottenham players. That was an issue. Like everything was about perfection, and that you'd see glimpses of it happen quite regularly. Some of the goals that we scored under Ange, some of the football we played is as good as you'll ever see. But when you try and play for things that are perfect, what will happen is you will turn the ball over more often than you should. You'll leave yourself in quite precarious positions, I think the Premier League over the last 2 years, I'm firmly, with the amount of money that's in the Premier League, I firmly believe that the what I would say is the middle teams, the teams that were like 5th to like 15th, the general quality of that has improved. And they target those teams that are playing in Europe in midweek and think to themselves on the weekends, we've had a week to prepare and you haven't. And if you're not fully on your A game, they'll beat you up. And that happened last season. And the last 6 months or so, he's quite honest that we kind of gave up in the league, and it did feel like that every weekend. I think that's a really hard thing to judge him by. I think if I'm a Forest fan right now, I'm thinking, hold on, this is a manager that basically said he can't really manage multiple competitions, and now he's coming to a club that's in multiple competitions. That's got to be a worry. But if you can stay fit, if all the players can stay fit, it can be fun.
We discussed this on the pod this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, just on the injuries, people who missed it. Last season, Forest 77 games missed collectively, Spurs 193, 41 separate injuries, 1,533 days lost. So the second worst record in the league versus the best for Forest, just for some context there. I knew you came on and wanted him sacked because that injury record quite early on, I think, as well.
I think last season when I came on, I think I was quite vocal.
I think you were at the end of your tether with him a bit.
The injuries felt unsustainable. When it's constantly hamstrings, you're like, mate, you are like, here we go again. He, in terms of how we would always build up with us, is short from the keeper, build up through two centre backs. So much is placed on those centre backs because everybody else starts moving forward. You'll see they play out, around quite a bit, but when it's turned over, you're like, oh, there's not really a six that's sort of sitting in front of them. That's what that all the time we really struggled with, was that there was never really that outlet that sit in front of them that would help them. We'd try people like Basuma and Bentancur. Partly it's recruitment, because we didn't have, I don't think we had someone as good as, say, Doug Luiz that would sit in front of us. We'd have cried out to have someone like him that would sit in front of our back four. But it just felt like suddenly every time you gave the ball away, those guys were running, and therefore, guess what? They got injured quite a lot because they were always having to turn really quickly and run back on their heels. And then when you go forward, again, if his wingers, he likes to use his wingers really wide. And even if they're inverted wingers, what I would say, he'd still keep them wide. So Son, we saw last season, would want to be on his right foot, but he would still push Son right to as far as he can wide on the left wing. Well, when you've got everybody sort of wide, then when the ball turns over, well, those guys are useless. Like, they can't stop a transition, so suddenly everyone's turning around, running back as fast as they possibly can. Hamstrings will go. Mistakes will happen. A lot of the times people would say, we didn't block enough, we didn't do that stuff. The players were knackered. They just run 70 yards. Like, it's not surprising if the tackle's not the best, if the block's not the best, or if they're not particularly well set up. For things like set pieces, people would say, we're really bad at set pieces, and you would go like, at set pieces they were panting and getting their breath back, at times. They weren't thinking, how do we get well organised for this? He places a huge amount of physical demand on your players.
Where does Chris Wood fit in, out of curiosity? I know Solanke was the 9 who didn't really play as a 9 last season. Our attack's built around getting Chris Wood the ball. Is he a dud for Ange, or does he actually thrive under it?
I think there is a lot on the player there. on what they would do. And I think with Chris Wood, I think that could be a positive. I think it could be a positive for him. So with Solanke, what he did very much is he played him at 9. He'd come from Bournemouth, where a lot of the time the crosses were almost in front of him a lot. He would do a lot of like sliding finishes, a lot of trying to get on the end of things, but mainly across the ground. Not a lot of headers, a lot of get the man in behind. And then he came to us, and actually what it is the number 9 really just occupies the centre backs. They stays high, stays on them, will progress all of it through those wide wingers, and then eventually the ball will come into the box. More often than not, cutbacks are big with Ange, so they'll use the wingers very wide. The fullbacks will tend to then maybe potentially underlap through them. I can see, for example, Nico, like if he's on the left and he's got his right foot, well actually he's kind of perfect for that sort of underlap if you use a left winger. One of them might, sometimes what he'll do is take one of the fullbacks and so say sit them into midfield and then like release one of the midfielders to almost be that inverted fullback higher up. So you might find maybe Aina does more of I'll sit a bit more, do a bit more inverted.
Zinchenko's interesting, isn't he? Because with inverted fullbacks, could Aina even be at risk, or could Nico be at risk? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't know if Zinchenko's got legs for what he would expect from his players. So I'm not sure about that. I think Aina and Nico are just good physical specimens. I think he would like them a lot more. I think he'll like Elliot Anderson. I think he'll like Doug Luiz. I think all of those guys. There's Morgan Gibbs White, perfect. As a man that just runs all day. It's Maddison with legs that work. So I expect Morgan Gibbs White will really enjoy it. For Chris Wood, one of the issues with cutbacks is that your centre forward quite often becomes the decoy. So that's what we tended to use Solanke with. Is the Solanke, you'd watch it, he'd end up in the goal before the ball ends up in the goal, almost type finish, and he sort of keeps running and like almost distracts the keeper. But what you'd find is the guys like Gibbs White, if it's Ndoye, whoever it is that's sitting sort of those positions more sort of centrally or coming off the wings, they'll use those for cutback goals, I think, quite a lot.
Well, you know what we need to do? We need to buy back Brennan, bring him home, don't we? Tap in at the back post.
Brennan, keep him home. Yeah.
One more thing. Do you want me to ask you a couple of bits about other stuff I want to ask you, or do you want to go through your charts? I don't know what your charts actually tell us.
The only thing I was going to say was I've seen a lot today, is me as a FPL guy and a Spurs guy, about the stylistic differences between Nuno and Ange. I sent you the XG timeline for Ange's tenure.
I need to drop that in. I'll drop that in while you tell us a bit more. I don't know
if you want to show that, because people get a bit about that. But what I would say is the bit I'd be interested in, you need to be interested in, is probably the start. Like for the start, I think everyone's really worried about him defensively. Actually, when he started at Tottenham, our defence in that first 10 games, he made a dramatic improvement to our defence in the first up until that Chelsea game. The defence had never been stronger in terms of the expected goals against. As soon as the injuries happened, like it would for anybody. You know it right now. If you lost Murillo and Milenkovic, you'd suddenly be like, well, I don't suspect we'll keep many clean sheets.
What about, just to interrupt there, sorry, we discussed Milenkovic quite a lot and Murillo on today's pod with the high line and whether it's sustainable to play that high line, but particularly with Milenkovic. Is Romero Milenkovic, or has he got more legs? I don't know if you think that or not.
Romero is incredibly good Romero and Van der Ven, both of them are incredibly good at taking turns to be the sweeper, to cover and make a lot of ground. Ultimately, they ended up making so much ground that they got hurt all the time. But both of them are very quick and very good at anticipating and mobile enough to get around. It would worry me, I think, a little bit with Milenkovic in terms of is he mobile enough for what he'll be exposed to. But maybe if he's plays on the... Is Milenkovic normally on the right side?
Murillo's left-footed, yeah.
Murillo's on the left foot, isn't he? So I think Aina will try and help out a lot. I think when Romero is out and we had, say, for example, Dragusin's a pretty similar profile to Milenkovic in terms of a big, not so mobile guy. He used Porro a lot deeper to try and help him out, and I think he'll do the same with Aina. I suspect Aina will stay back more to try and help out Milenkovic.
Interesting. I'll just put the XG chart in, and then we can talk through your other charts, which might lose a few people. We'll see. It depends how deep they go into it.
I'll try.
Right. This is just the XG chart. I'll just put it up just quickly. So you're saying that for people who are listening or watching, well, green is good, red is bad, and green's very good at the start, and then it goes a bit haywire.
Yeah. So across the bottom, you've got time, first season, second season. Across the left, you've got XG, so expected goals. The red is the expected goals against, and the green is the expected goals for. So what you would be able to see in this when he started, so you want the red arrow going down all the time. You want to drive down expected goals, and you want the green arrow going up. We saw a reduction in our attack. I would say a lot of that I would put down to the fact that Harry Kane was not in that team. Yeah, I think I wouldn't say is that he's a negative manager. I think everyone would think completely opposite with Ange, but I think it's worth noting that our actual expected goals went down after he signed. In our expected goals conceded dropped for a period of time. Then the second we had an injury, they didn't just go up, they broke new levels of stuff that we've never ever got to. So what you're seeing at the peak there on that left hand side is roughly like 2.5 expected goals against a game.
Which is relegation stuff, really.
In a 5-game rolling average, that is. So 5 games in a row of having more than 2 goals against XG. That is relegation stuff. We started to get it back. So what that was in that period of time was Van der Ven was injured and Romero was suspended. Once Romero came back, we gradually started to work that back into play, and kept relative parity in terms of, say, the expected goals against versus for, but games were always tight. It was very rarely, you never really felt out of sight very often. So, and they very rarely weren't 1-0 either. So there was just a huge number of games where we either drew or we won 2-1 or we lost 2-1. I think I've got a feeling in that first game there was something like a record, like we lost like a record amount of games by 1 goal in a season for Tottenham. Is we got and that's a little bit the style of play. You always feel like the opposition's got a chance, and I think as the season went on, teams grew and grew more and more in confidence that if we can just stay with Tottenham, at some point they'll turn over a stupid chance.
Did he evolve in the last days of the Europa League? That's the perception that 26% possession in the final, did a really good job on Frankfurt. Did he show some tactical flexibility, or was he just totally forced into it and had no choice?
I just think he went I'm just going to. Of course, he knows how to. He can stink games up, but you would not want him playing the style of football that he was playing in that second half. You wouldn't want that. If you go to the other charts that I sent for you,
which one?
If you go to the field tilt one, if you've got that one,
Yes, hang on one sec.
This one.
Explain what field tilt is, because even I don't know that, and
Okay.
I'm a bit of a data nerd.
So field tilt basically means the whereabouts in the pitch the game is being played. Yeah. So effectively here, what you're able to see is Nottingham Forest top of this. More is good. Yeah.
What's
Which
the time
means
period of this? Sorry, this season or last season?
this season. This is
Okay,
after
cool.
3 games this season.
Yeah.
So you have spent 65% of games in the opponent's half. The ball is going with you into the opponent's half. Yeah. You know, this is good. This means that there's clearly been a style. This isn't something that was happening last season. There is definitely, I would say, evidence of a stylistic change in the first 3 weeks of the season, that you want more of the ball than you had last season, and you want to spend more time in the final third. Now, some of that might not be that incisive. Like, some of it might be passing around a lot. If you looked currently in the Premier League about passes completed in the final third, so that means an actual pass that went from one of your guys to another guy's, Elliot Anderson's made more final third passes than anybody else in the league so far this season with 62, and second is Gibbs White. So 2 in the same team, and Hudson-Odoi is 8th in that list. So I don't think there's any other team. Let me just check. Newcastle with Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali in 9th and 10th in the league. But other than that, is nobody else is touching the ball and completing passes in the final third as much as you are this season. Now, that's quite different to last season, where I think a lot of us, were seeing you more of a counter team, more of a team that would hit you on the break, that were very happy to almost give up possession to an extent and sit in a little bit, and then know that you had the quality to break people, and that Chris Wood would just score anything that he had the chance of. So that, to me, if you continue with this method, is that stylistically different to what Ange wants to play? I don't think that is that different. So I do think you are better set up, and it's not as crazy a move to go from Nuno to Ange as maybe it seems. If you do the PPDA one.
Yep, just explain what that one is as well.
So PPDA is passes per defensive action.
Okay.
So that's how many times someone can pass the ball around an opposition before you intervene. And therefore the more frequent that is, so the lower the number, that actually shows the higher that you're pressing teams. So currently, again, 3 week sample, but you've pressed harder than any other team in the league. Again, Ange is a very good press. His teams, especially if you speak to the Celtic guys, they'll tell you high pressure, loads of time in the final third. It feels to me like there's been stylistic orders been almost pushed upon Nuno for the last few weeks, and guess what? He's not the guy to probably be doing those things, and therefore this feels like a natural change for me, a little bit more than what the headlines might say. I think everyone's looking at sort of historic Nuno and thinking Ange is completely different. I don't know it is as different as it is in what we've seen in the start of the season. I don't know if it is that different compared to the recruitment that we've seen from you guys. Pressing high, and then the last one I think I sent you was the build-up attacks versus direct attacks.
Yep, just explain how this one works.
So this again is like teams in the Premier League and how they attack. So there are some teams that are pure direct attackers. So high in the direct attack but low in the build-up is effectively your old long ball merchants. Yeah, the guys that would whack it and hope and try and counter and purely work on that one. The build-up attackers that you'd see in the sort of far right, but low on the left-hand side, they're the ones that pass people to death. And if you are top left and top right, that means actually you're kind of a multifaceted, good attacking team. And there's really only two teams in the first 3 games of the season that are doing a high volume of build-up and direct attacks, and it's Forest and Liverpool. Like, there's a lot of evidence in these first 3 game weeks in terms of what you've seen that should be like, wow, this is really good. I can't believe... Why would we sack a manager? But I guess it's... like, there's a lot where I'm sure the analysts would look at it and say, wow, like, Forest are about to explode. But I guess personality-wise, stuff I've talked about before about Nuno, when it starts going south, you are better to get him out. You know, if you go speak to Wolves fans about the Nuno departure, they will tell you they probably hung on to him too long. Once he was grumpy, he's not a guy to have in your team, around your team. So I think there's good reason to move Nuno on. I think there's good reason that Ange actually could slip quite quickly into this team, that he won't need a lot of time to hit the ground running. And I can't believe you would be bringing him in to then move away from what we've seen in the first few weeks of good attacking play. I don't think you'd be trying to go stodgy.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've discussed the reasons for his departure to death, but a lot of it was obviously off the field, the degradation of the relationship, and then the absolute horror show against West Ham, where we were awful from 60 minutes to full time, and we weren't great before that. But the first 2 games and pre-season, I know obviously playing FPL, you saw we couldn't hit a barn door in pre-season, but you could see what the plan was.
It's just what the plan was, and it's a lot of recruitment.
Yeah,
it's a lot of recruitment as well. Is so therefore that takes time.
Last thing I want to ask you about before I let you go is, well, 2 things actually. First one is, we touched about more man management. Spurs media are actually really good at putting out behind the scenes videos, so I don't know if it gives you a lopsided opinion of what a good man manager he is or not, but is that a thing? Because the Spurs players seem to absolutely love the guy, to be fair.
Yeah, like I say, he's look, you can watch, you probably will watch, just like I watched many videos of him back in Australia, back what we did at Spurs and all those things. He's really good at it. He's really good at it. It doesn't really come across actually on like his interviews. The interviews is one bit. Yeah, the interviews is one where you're like, oh, that will rile you the other way. But his stuff he does clearly his man management is first class.
Just on the interviews then and the media thing, Mark Southerns, who we both know well, said that he found his interviews off-putting by the end. And I saw a comment in the chat saying, well, you can't blame him the way the media treated him. He was going to snap eventually. How much of that do you see in that in terms of a bit of snobbery that, oh, he's Australian, the mate thing wears thin, versus actually he was just too thin-skinned and he should have fronted up, and it showed a negative side to his personality that is a worry?
It was his first job. It was his first job in the Premier League. And I think you have to give him a second job to understand whether that's going to be a continual problem. Like, if he comes to you and he's still doing interviews where he's just looking down while the interview's happening, he's very dismissive, it can come across just brash in a quite dismissive way. That's how I found it got as the seasons, in the second season certainly went more and more on, was I found almost his presentation to that interviewer almost invited it to an extent. He would quite often turn up. He'd be looking down. He's clear like his shirt would be untucked and stuff by that time. The collar would be all over the place type stuff. And then I think a lot of the time the interviewer then was like, "There's a soundbite in this for me. Like he's bad." Yeah. And so I do think it's an unforgiving place. You have to interview straight after a game. He was much better in the pressers than he was in the interviews, but the pressers are very much more controlled in terms of what's being asked of him. I always felt he was excellent in pressers. I always, especially if you lost, you come away from an interview being like, I don't like this guy.
Yeah, the match of the day, same old story, one thing springs to mind, and he gave a really crappy answer for that. But then I watched pressers with him pre-match, and there was the clown question, which wasn't quite as bad as it sounded, but it didn't sound great from a London Evening Standard journalist. And then you think, well, are you taking the guy seriously because he's Australian? Is there a bit of snobbery? I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking for the media, but he's going to have to do a better job with the media, because Forest fans are a bit down on him already, to say the least. So he's got work to do, I think.
Yeah, look, at Spurs, just in general, in the environmental world of this, we've just removed our chairman. Well, that's almost a tick up for maybe what Ange potentially had to deal with over the last 6 months. We don't know the whole behind the scenes stuff, but we do know that the chairman's been removed from his position, so he clearly hadn't handled all of the Ange stuff well. The one I would probably prompt you guys to look for is he used I way too much. In his press conferences, in his interviews, it was always I. Like, it was never we. It was never we didn't do this, or we, or we're going to work on this, or we did this well, or we won this. So even like when he, even you go back to the I always win a trophy, and then it was I won a trophy. I did this. Like, it was almost it became very much in that second season. You'd physically be able to notice the number of times he said I versus we, and it really grated on me during that second half of the season. I can fully understand it though. If he knew that he was going to be out of the job at the end of the season, he was almost defending himself that is as a man alone from it. If he came to you guys in a new job and was still talking all about himself and not about creating the club spirit, not creating a family, and that's not just him and the players he works with, but that's you guys as well. That's the fans and everybody else, that you're all on board together. That's where I'd be a little concerned.
Do you know, just before we go, do you know anything about Scott Munn? He's supposed to be coming in as an exec, which suggests Ross Wilson's going. Yeah, well, Ross Wilson's our chief football officer, is very well respected. I think all noise is going to go to Newcastle and get a big job there. And a few journos tweeting Scott Munn's in line for a Forest role, Ben Jacobs here, and all of us like, who the hell's Scott Munn? Do you know anything about him?
So Scott Munn was part of City Group, so the Man City guys, prior to us. So he was, doing their affiliates and stuff like that, and then he came to us. He was really highly rated with it. I think everybody who worked under Levy, it was always a case of how much will you ever think it's Scott Munn versus it's Levy, and therefore how hard. It's really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult to always assess how good a job anybody in the sort of back room or hierarchy do when Levy's there. And I think, is that going to be any different for you guys with Marinakis? Do you know what I mean? It's probably going to be similar, where it's hard to tangibly say how good a job those guys are doing. Scott Munn was supposed to be taking over most of the football operated stuff. We just didn't ever really see anything from him to be able to understand was it a good job or not. The only thing you'd see from him was like occasionally you'd see like photos of him at an airport, potentially going to look to talk to someone. That was literally as much as you'd know about whether he was doing anything. And ultimately, we didn't sign them, so therefore people would say, well, he's doing a bad job.
Interesting. Right, we shall leave it there. Really great insight. I appreciate that from Baker. I've got no idea when we actually play you in the league, just to tee up when you're next on. It's not for a while, is it? So,
but it's going to be more interesting now.
Oh yeah. I'm really keeping you. Just in a word, what kind of reception will he get back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium?
Yeah, he'll get a fabulous reception.
Yeah,
he'll get a fabulous reception. What Look at the last reception effectively he had for us at the parade. Like, this will be the next one. I would expect nothing more than an absolutely fabulous reception from us.
That's a good note to end on, certainly. Right, do check out Above Average FPL with Baker and Adam, as I always say. Great work there. I'm going to need to tune in to save my season. It's been a 3-week car crash, but I'm holding firm.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's been difficult opening.
Yeah, 3 Forest players is absolutely killing me. 3 Forest, 2 Villa attack. So.
Hey, let me ask you that before you let me go, because I suspect, I'll tweet this out, and I think there's a lot of FPL guys that went there. For those that have an FPL question, those that have Forest assets, what would you do with them right now? What are you thinking of doing?
Holding till after the Sunderland game. I mean, Arsenal away. Save points for sells. You never know. Murillo. I mean, I've got Dubravka because my backup.
How do you feel about this Arsenal game? Are you worried?
Unless someone's going to get tanked. If we go up and put up a decent performance, something to take into the next 2 games, I think I'm okay with it. It's not free hit territory because no Premier League game is. Because Arsenal aren't perfect. They're very, very good, and they should win the game. But yeah, I'm keeping Murillo, who should finally get the DEFCON points for those who play it to that degree, and then I'll keep Wood for 3 games, and then I'll move them all out. I'm sure even if we're doing well, I'll move all 3 out, and I'll be getting Arsenal and get Cole Palmer back in a few weeks. I want to hold my wild card till game week 13, but the first 3 weeks is testing my patience. Certainly, I must admit.
It's a testing game, mate. It's a testing game, but football is.
Exactly. Thanks to Baker. Next on to Martin from 20 Minute Tims to get his thoughts on Ange's time at Celtic. 2 great seasons there before he moved to Tottenham. As I said at the top, fair to say he loves him. So let's hear more from Martin. A quick word of thanks for the Trent navigation. Ange's first game is at Arsenal. It's the early kickoff in the Premier League. It's on TNT Sports. The nav is open from 10 a.m. and they will be showing the game in full. You can watch it on the indoor screens throughout the pub, all the outdoor screens, cash scales from £4. You don't need to book or anything. Just turn up on the day and enjoy it there. And thanks as ever to the nav for their support. Martin from the 20 Minute Tims podcast to give us the Celtic point of view on Ange Postecoglou. How are you doing this evening, mate?
Oh, good, thanks, Matt. Very good. How's yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Been a long day, as mentioned, but yeah, it's exciting. Certainly, a managerial change. Looking forward to hearing what you think about it. Why is your podcast called 20 Minute Tims, by the way?
It's like Coldplay, we're stuck with the name now. So when we first started, the 3 of us liked a podcast called the 10-Minute Podcast. It was a comedy podcast, and we thought we could do a Celtic podcast in 10 minutes. We tried to record the first one and realised it wasn't long enough, so we made it 20 minutes, and then very soon we realised 20 minutes wasn't enough, and unfortunately we're stuck with the name, even though none of our podcasts last 20 minutes.
That sounds like ours. It's supposed to be about 40 and often end up being an hour, certainly. Just for Postecoglou context then, Forest fans know about the Spurs time quite well, but Celtic, he spent 2 years there. He won the league twice. He won cup competitions. It sounds like he came in at a low ebb, which I'll pick your brain about. But just in general, what did you make of him at Celtic?
When you had emailed us asking us to go on, 3 of us were racing to see who could reply first to talk about this man. I absolutely love the guy. He came in at Celtic and it was just an absolute whirlwind. We didn't quite know who he was at the start, but once you looked into him, you went, all right, there's something here. And then once it got started, it was just a brilliant ride. And I would say to you, buckle up for the ride because it's going to be wild. But I don't think you want to buckle up. I think you just want to enjoy it and let it run free. I love the guy. He sort of changed how I think about football, but also he changed how I think about life a lot of the ways. And that sounds quite maybe over dramatic, but I sort of listened to every press conference that he would do. Everything about him, I was like, I love this guy, man. He was exactly what Celtic needed, and probably still what they need.
I'll ask you quite a few things about him there. It's interesting. I watched a lot of his press conferences when he was at Spurs as well, and I was drawn to a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, the stuff he did with kids in the community as well. So that's certainly interesting. What about with the media? I'll ask you about that because Scotland and Glasgow seems like a real goldfish bowl. Did the media go after him a lot, and was there a bit of snobbery? He's Australian, and how did he handle all that?
Yeah, definitely. There was so much snobbery from the very get go, and even with some Celtic fans, it was so. Just to give you a bit of context, where Celtic in the COVID season had a disastrous season, we're going for 10 in a row. It was very clear early on it wasn't working, and Celtic's board thought they knew better than the fans and decided to keep on the manager until it was completely untenable. But he left in early March, and sort of rumours started up who was going to be the manager, and it got into May time, and it was Eddie Howe was the Celtic manager. It was going to happen, and then at the sort of last second, it was over, and we all thought another disaster from Celtic. What are they going to do? And it just came out that Ange Postecoglou was going to be the Celtic manager, and a lot of us were like, who? But then you go and look into him, you do your due diligence, and you find out about the guy, and you go, all right. Reporters in Scotland are very cliquey, and it's a case of, oh, this will never work in Scotland. Who's this guy coming from Australia, Japan? Ange was treated like an absolute novice, but the guy's won trophies in everywhere he goes. He's won trophies Japan, Australia. He's won trophies on an international level. He didn't get the respect he should have when he came into the place, but very soon he earned the respect of these journalists. And for us as fans, you want to hear your manager's got your team's back. He backed Celtic all the way, backed the fans all the way. He got the fans on side, and he didn't take anything from the journalist. If they asked him a silly question, he gave them a silly answer. And there was one of the times I remember, what was it about? It was coming up to a big game, and there was something about a team had cut Celtic's allocation for an away game, and that was the first question he got asked. And he's like, come on, mate, we're here to talk about the football. I'll give you another chance to ask me a question here. Stuff like that, he just didn't give them. There was certain journalists you could tell he didn't get on with, so he was quite short with them, but not ignorant with them. And he was really good with the fans, and he put the journalists in their place. And even when, so it's, as Celtic fans, we think the media is more Rangers orientated. So even when Rangers had managers come in, he seen off Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, he was replaced by Michael Beale. Now, when you compare Ange Postecoglou's CV to Michael Beale is a nobody, yet the media were trying to put Michael Beale up alongside Ange, and he just batted it away and just beat Michael Beale at every opportunity. So he knew how to work the media, he knew what to do with the fans. He was just brilliant in all aspects.
When you talk about change the way you think about football and the way you think about life, even in what way? What do you mean there?
So there's always people that come in and say they've got a philosophy and they stick to it, and they don't deviate from that. And with football, it's kind of, especially in Scotland, like, oh, it's just find a way to win. This passing thing won't work, and what happens when you go up into Europe? Teams will tear you apart. But he got everybody believing in it, and there's always this manager needs time to get his message across. But Ange Postecoglou came into Celtic, and you could see within a match or two what he was trying to do. Now, it didn't work out sometimes in games, especially away games at the very start. But in most games, you could see, this is what he's trying to do. If this comes off, it'll be brilliant. So I kind of always liked that sort of passing style of football, but it made me think, no, see, if you have a belief in a way you play, you stick to that, because I listen to Ange a lot, listen to him do that, and also got the opportunity. Celtic do a coaching convention every year where they get, excuse me, they get coaches from the club at all levels, analysts, all the youth development. They get them all together and they do presentations on what they do. And us as coaches get to go and see it. So you got to watch the first team train, and then you went back to Celtic Park, and Ange Postecoglou delivered a presentation on his style of play, and it was absolutely fascinating. He was just went, look, you can go and watch my team. There's no secrets here. I'm not going to change it. I'll tell you how I play, but teams can't stop me. So I don't care if you know what I'm going to do. It's up to you to try and stop me, and not a lot of people do. So it made me think, see, if you believe in something, whether it's football, whether it's a way of playing, whether it's a value you have in life, stick to that. Because as soon as you deviate away from that, that's when you start to lose people. And you could see at Celtic, he told the players, this is how I'm going to play. You get on board with it and it'll work. And when it did work, it was absolutely brilliant.
With that style of play, do you think it translates? Well, obviously he's had a go in the Premier League. Maybe he's going to do things slightly differently. Maybe he's going to be exactly the same. Did it translate from Scotland, where Celtic are the best team, to where Forest are a mid-table-ish, top half Premier League club? Do you think it can work, or does he need to be more pragmatic? I don't know.
Well, this is the sort of thing that you maybe struggle with the Spurs thing. I don't really judge managers if they've been to Spurs, to be honest, because who has went to Spurs and been a success? We've seen Nuno go there, and he's been done well everywhere else, including yourselves, apart from at Spurs. We've seen Conte go everywhere and be a success apart from Spurs. Up until recently, Jose Mourinho went everywhere and was a success apart from Spurs. So the common denominator is Spurs. So I don't want to judge teams on Spurs, but he went in and he adapted quickly, but then things turned for him. So from Nottingham Forest, with the way I see them play, it was a sort of counter-attacking. It's going to be a complete change, but with the players at Nottingham Forest, I can see how they would be able to adapt to it. And the first sort of player I think of that could take his game to a higher level under Ange would be Elliot Anderson. I think he's a great player. He already looks great. And I think with the way Ange has his midfield and the way he gets his midfielders to play, I think Elliot Anderson can go to another level. So I wonder, well, after the Spurs episode, whether he will sort of adapt his formation. People say he's got this formation and he sticks to it rigidly. He's got principles he sticks to rigidly. But when he won the trophy with Australia, he was playing a 3-4-2-1. And when he was at Celtic, he was playing a 4-3-3. So he hasn't just stuck to the same thing throughout his career. He does adapt slightly to the players he's got, but his philosophy will stay the same. And I think with Nottingham Forest, I don't know how you view their style of play, but under Ange Postecoglou, whether Celtic were playing Kilmarnock or they were playing Real Madrid, they approached the game in the same way. But under him, we never took many absolute beatings or shellackings in Europe. Yes, Real Madrid, we went toe-to-toe with them, but they beat us 3-0. But that's probably fair in the division and the sort of difference in players we've got. But Celtic were 0-0, we hit the post, we created good chances. So I think with Nottingham Forest, it's a good opportunity. As a football fan, I want to see my team go out and try and win every game. Under Ange, you'll do that. You'll go out and try and win and attack every game.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Europe, because the first season he barely got his feet under the door and they lost in the qualifier to Midtjylland, so you can't read too much into that, I don't think. The second season they made the group stage, as you say. I think they drew 2 and lost 4. But there's quite a lot of context around that? You think then did they actually play quite well in those games against, I think it was Madrid, Leipzig, and Shakhtar when I was looking earlier?
Yeah, the first season we went into the qualifiers and the team was an absolute mess. But we went out the Champions League and then we dropped into the Europa League and got Alkmaar. And I thought we're going to be out of Europe altogether because Alkmaar are decent. But we'd got a few signings in and we managed to beat Alkmaar and go through. And I know you want to touch on the Champions League, but just touching on the Europa League. Into that Europa League, the games were brilliant. I had an amazing time going to see those games, and it even got to the last game where we got to quite a tough Europa League group. We done quite well in it, but we were going to finish third and drop down to the conference. But it was all sort of sorted by the last game, and we're playing Real Betis at home in the last game. We couldn't move up or down, so Ange Postecoglou completely changed the starting lineup to save players because we had a load of games around that time, and we put it's still like a joke lineup that we put up, that the worst lineup in Celtic's history. So we had Real Betis coming, the worst lineup you'll ever see, and Celtic beat them 4-3. Why? Because they still played the exact same way. They still attacked. There was players playing out of position. There was guys that barely, if never, played for Celtic again, but they knew what they had to do on the pitch, and they still went about and played the same way. So we were all looking forward after that to going into the Champions League, because as you will find out, Ange Postecoglou, and as we were told at the time, Ange's second season is where it all kicks off, and where his ideas are across. Everybody knows what they want. Going into that second season, we genuinely felt like going into the Champions League games, let's go toe-to-toe with these teams and see where it gets us. And like you say, we only drew 2 and lost 4, but we lost twice to Real Madrid. Okay, that can happen, but that home game at Celtic Park, we went toe-to-toe with them. They scored a couple 3 goals like quite late on in the second half. But against Leipzig, against Shakhtar, we should have beat Shakhtar home and away. We were playing Shakhtar, it wasn't in Ukraine, but we missed chances. Like Celtic's, the chances we created, we didn't get the points that we should have, and we thought after that, no, do you know what? We'll learn a lot from this campaign, and when we go into the Champions League next time, we'll be better set for it, because Celtic hadn't been in the Champions League for a couple of years. So it works in the Champions League. He went in and played his game, went toe-to-toe with teams like Real Madrid, Leipzig and Shakhtar, who are a good team. We didn't quite get what we deserved out those games, but you always felt that we went to win those games.
No, it's good to hear, especially around the Europa League, because we're going to be in there. And if our reserve team can beat Betis 4-3, then I'll be loving that, certainly. What about the squad he was given? I looked at the transfers. Was he given a good squad, or did he have a rough hand and he transformed it in that first season and really kicked on in the second season?
Completely transformed it. Completely transformed. And to be honest, he transformed the club. So, as I said, Celtic were going for 10 in a row, completely blew it. And within that last year, we had about 4 or 5 first team players who were going into the last year of their contract. Added to that, we loaned in about 4 or 5 players. So you had a team that was basically not going to be there the following season. So by the time Ange came in at Celtic, the loan players had all gone. Guys like Christopher Ayer, Ryan Christie, Odsonne Edouard were all pretty much out the door. So it left them with a blank slate, a clean slate to start from. He'd only had maybe 3 or 4 first team players that you could say will be staying, and he completely transformed the team. That's the thing with the way he plays, because he knows how he plays, because he knows how he wants to play. I find it easier. I thought it was easier for him to say, I need a player that does this, go and get me it. And the advantage Celtic had, it might not be an advantage to yourselves, was he was coming from the Japanese league. So we signed 3 or 4 players from the Japanese league over the first season that made a huge difference to Celtic. Guys that came in and just hit the ground running. But he brought in a guy like Joe Hart, who you'd maybe think isn't an Ange Postecoglou player. But Ange knew when he came in, look, this Celtic team has been gutted. It needs to restart. So he planned it carefully, brought in guys at 25, 26, 27, guys that were first team ready players that would just go in, guys who had experience and who had that sort of leadership. And he brought in Joe Hart, and Joe Hart said he made him fall in love with football again. That was a guy that probably would have retired a year or two, but he was at Celtic for 3 seasons before he retired and won the league in every season there. So he knows what he's doing, he knows what he wants, and with the transfers he brings in, it's brilliant. He knows what he wants in the players. He had Joe Hart in goal. He brought in Cameron Carter-Vickers and Carl Starfelt, centre halves. Those two, until Starfelt left, which was just as Ange left as well. Every league game that they played together in, they didn't lose a single one over 2 seasons. So he built up these partnerships. He made players like Greg Taylor, who was a left back at Celtic that nobody quite fancied, but he made him this key part of Celtic because he was that inverted fullback. So he turned around guys that were already there, and he brought in these guys that just hit the ground running. And as a football fan, what do you want to see? You want to see your team attacking. So he brought in wingers with flair that attacked. He brought in Kyogo, a striker who was just a superstar for us. Then he brought in guys like Matt O'Reilly and Rio Hatate that were just brilliant in midfield that could dominate games. So he knows what he wants. If you give him the tools, he'll deliver.
So just a couple more before I let you go. In terms of
I
his,
could stay here all night and talk.
I can tell. In terms of like legacy and where he ranks, and I'm probably picking the wrong managers here, but from a scale of like Martin O'Neill to John Barnes and Jock Stein to Ronnie Dahlia and that kind of thing, high versus low. How high up the scale is he for Celtic fans as great managers?
Highest. For me, Martin O'Neill came in year 2000 and changed everything for me. I'd only seen Celtic win the league once until he came in, and then he came in and just completely changed everything about Celtic. So it's hard for me to say MD will ever beat Martin O'Neill, but Ange Postecoglou is as close to that as possible. Brendan Rodgers came in first time around and had an invincible treble with Celtic, brought success to Celtic. Ange Postecoglou is up there as close to Martin O'Neill as I can put MD. I don't think he'll ever be beaten. Even in our podcast, we've got a Discord, and people still say those 2 seasons under Ange were the best fun I've ever had. The nights or the days, the nights I had supporting Celtic, like the first season when we clinched the league was a midweek game. We were playing up at Dundee United, so travelling back from Dundee midweek, everybody just met at Celtic Park. There was fireworks, there was flares. It's one of the best nights I have ever had in my life, never mind in football. That's the sort of thing he brings to you. He brings that, and I just hope you enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I was going to say, you don't need to do a sales pitch, you've already done it, but Forest fans seem to be, there's a lot of fixation from Forest fans on last season, 17th in the league, all that kind of stuff, versus his previous stuff, which I think is probably because we don't know about it as much, because we're so Premier League centric. Maybe we're a bit snobs like English people like that, I don't know. But what would your kind of message be if you wanted to give one to wavering Forest fans to get behind him? What would you say?
Kind of like I've been saying before, as a football fan, like Celtic are usually the best team in the country, so we've got the sort of Celtic way, we call it. We want to play attacking football. He will bring that to you. It's the complete opposite to what you're used to. But looking across your squad, I think his way of playing can translate to the players you've got. You've got a lot of new players in there, and with Ange as well, it's not just the manager you get, it's the man. He will back your team, he will take you on, he will take you on this wild ride. Just enjoy it, man, because it could be great. And again, with the Europa League this season, he's won it last season. He knows what it takes. And like I say, when I went to that coaching convention, he's not dogmatic. He wants to play with the principles, but he talked about adapting his tactics from the first season to the second season because they'd analysed how goals were scored, and they seen across the main goals in Europe were from cutbacks and tap-ins. So he adapted his tactics to get Celtic to do more cutbacks and tap-ins. So he's not just going to stick with this one way of playing. He does adapt slightly. So I think you're in for a good time. I don't know how it'll be coming in sort of not mid-season, but when he's not had the pre-season and all that. But I don't think it will take him too long. But with the Europa League games coming up thick and fast, and then the Premier League as well, it could be a wee bit difficult. But he gets his message across quickly, and the players will love playing for him.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks to Martin. Thanks to this will be paired with Baker, the Spurs fan, who talked interestingly about cutbacks and that kind of stuff. So there is a tactical evolution there. So really interesting to see how this all plays out. But thanks to both guys. I'll wrap things up with a final message, and then we shall be back tomorrow. Thanks to Baker and to Martin for their thoughts on Ange Postecoglou and the job he did at their clubs. We shall be back, depending on when you listen to this, tomorrow with an Arsenal match preview. Obviously, lots to say there. We'll also have an opposition preview, and we'll hear from Adam Summerton, Emily and Gary with their thoughts on what's going on. If you want to hear even more, we've done loads of stuff, possibly too much. I'll have to wind it back a little bit next week, but we did some really good stuff with Seb Hutchinson, James Belshaw and Mark earlier today as I record this. And then we had the live reaction to Nuno going and Ange's likely appointment at that point with Greg, Temps, Pete and Chris. So loads and loads of content to go at. Check out as much as you can, as much as you want to. Do us a favor though, hit like on all of them, certainly this one. Do consider subscribing or membership or Patreon. 5-star reviews would be appreciated on Apple or Spotify. In the meantime, thanks for your company, and if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.